The last 3 decades of the 19th century were a time of massive change. Change industrially, change in the urban landscape, change in populations, change in economics. All of it was incredibly dynamic, extremely exciting, and in some cases a little bit disruptive and nerve-shattering. So as we look at the industry and the mass politics of this last 3-4 decades before we run into World War I, what we're going to see is a period of incredible energy and growth. We see in this era the second industrial revolution, and by that, compared to what we got in the first half of the course, that textile revolution, that wool and then cotton revolution that introduced steam engines to manufacturing and the factory system, and then finally the railroads. Well, what we see in this last quarter of the 19th century is sort of the natural outgrowth of that. Factory production is extended to lots of different industries. Transportation is expanded and speeded up in lots of different areas. And we move on to more heavy and durable goods. The second industrial revolution is going to produce a lot more gadgets, a lot more items that work in people's lives. Where the first industrial revolution had been heavily focused on textiles, this second industrial revolution is going to be steel. It's going to be chemicals production, and then the kind of things that chemicals, additives improve in life and work into medicine, into arms manufacturing, into agriculture, areas like that. And then finally, the new power source, the really great energy generator of this, is going to be electricity. And so we'll look at all of these things. Once again, we've got Britain in the lead. Britain is going to be one of the ones that at mid-century was experimenting with new methods for making iron and for improving iron and producing steel, high-quality steel, and high-quality steel in massive amounts. I mean, steel goes back to the Roman era. The Spaniards were making steel for Roman swords. But it had always been a precious commodity because it was so difficult to make that you only had very small quantities of it. The British are going to perfect methods during the mid-19th century for producing a lot more iron and a lot more, much more very high quality steel at relatively inexpensive prices. The Americans are going to do this too. Andrew Carnegie becomes sort of the guy most associated with steel in this country, but steel is going to be one of those industries in the second industrial revolution that really shows your coming of age as a modern economic and manufacturing power. And Britain will take the lead in that. Britain will be the early front runner. Catching up very quickly, though, is the newly unified Germany. You saw the dates on this started with 1870. The new German Kaiser Wilhelm is going to be working very hard to catch up to his British cousins, his rivals, in terms of manufacturing strength. And a lot of the territory that the Germans had acquired during that unification process had added raw resources, had added industrial areas, had added a very talented, educated, working population, and the Germans are going to be making the most of this, and they are going to catch up to the British in steel production by 1900. The company Krupp Manufacturing, most famous for weaponry, Krupp Arms, is going to be sort of the epitome, the goal that other countries are going to pursue for high quality steel manufacturing, and then steel is applied to weaponry. The Germans also are going to go heavy into chemicals though, chemical production. One of the companies that you might recognize for this is Bayer, like the aspirin company, B-A-Y-E-R. But the Germans are going to experiment with all different kinds of chemicals and chemical applications to different areas, and German heavy chemical manufacturing is going to be the envy of the world. The United States is also going to come on as a major player during this. In the first industrial revolution, the Americans had been sort of copycats. They had stolen a lot of British technology, they had applied it to their own, they had made a lot of money from that. In the second industrial revolution, the Americans are going to become some of the front runners. Like I said, Andrew Carnegie is the guy that we most associate with the steel industry and U.S. steel. And American steel production is not only going to catch up to Great Britain, but by the time we get to World War I, the Americans are going to be producing more steel than the British and the Germans combined. So the Americans get into heavy industry in a big way. Chemicals production, we're good. Companies like DuPont get into chemicals production in the United States. And the guy who comes to be associated primarily with electricity, again, another American inventor, is Thomas Edison. And Americans will, with their second industrial revolution, really double down on the gadgetry and the improvements to modern life. And they will apply these lessons from steel, from chemicals, from new technology to things like agriculture, to things like food production, to things like refrigeration, to electrification of urban areas, to new transportation methods, new manufacturing methods. And all of this comes together to form an incredibly powerful, incredibly wealth-building, but in some ways destabilizing rivalry between some countries who have grown exponentially fast in terms of their might and their power without necessarily working out all the issues that they have amongst each other as rivals and competitors.